Hello and welcome to the Ahead of the Game podcast. Today we're going to be going over a mock draft for the lottery that just went on. We just finished watching the lottery. We made our picks and we're going to hop on and discuss. Today I have Chris Filer here with me, and I am your host, James Oxford, as always. So Chris, you did get the number one pick today with the Hawks. Let me know where your head is at as far as this Hawks pick goes.
Thank you, James. As you know, I was not expecting to be discussing the Hawks with relation to the number one pick, and it's very interesting because I am going to go with Alex Sarr here because I do think he's the best. He's my number one guy on the board. Um, they're in a weird spot though. The key piece is assuming Trae Young moves on here. They've got DeJounte Murray under contract for quite a bit longer. Jalen Johnson is a fantastic young piece who really reached a new level this last year, and I really like him. Okongwu is a guy I really like. Capella's about at the end of this contract, but Okongwu is under contract now. I think it was a 4-year extension, and it's very, very affordable. I like Okongwu a lot. I don't think I'm convinced at this point that he is enough of a presence on the team to prevent me from taking who I think is the best player available in the draft, and that's Alex Sarr, especially when I'm not sure that the other guys on the board at this point are good enough to, again, prevent me from taking who I think is the best player, especially when we don't really know what the fits are going to be right this second. I think he is the kind of guy who's going to fit in next to Jalen Johnson. I really like the athleticism you have in the front court there with those two guys. Okongwu is going to be very tradable with that contract. He's a good player. Maybe they keep him and have a 3-guy rotation. I don't think that's crazy. It obviously is working out for Timberwolves, albeit that's some more obvious talent and more proven talent. But a 3 big rotation of those 3 guys would be awesome. If you're going to move on from Okongwu, I think that's absolutely doable with that great contract. And just the versatility. He's big, he's young, he's athletic. We've talked about him a little bit in prior podcasts, but I think he brings a lot to the table, defensively at least. Offensively, you hope. I think he's got maybe more upside than anybody in the draft, and he's got good hands. It's going to be a fun team to have there, and that's why I would go in that direction.
I totally get it. I'm not quite as high on Sarr as you are, but you laid out a lot of good points, and he's top of your board. And going to the direction I think the Hawks are going right now, best player available sounds like the smart pick. You also have the next pick on our board, the Wizards, and where are the Wizards going to go with this pick?
The Wizards are also in a weird spot. They don't have anyone I care about all that much as far as preventing me from taking prior picks. Denny Avdia is obviously a very nice player on a really great contract moving forward. I don't think if who I was going to pick was going to conflict with him, it would maybe prevent me. I'm going to go with Cody Williams here. I think he fits in great on any team, frankly. He's one of the most versatile players in the draft. I think he's going to be able to guard 2s and 3s. Doesn't have the foot speed for 1s yet, but him and Bilal Coulibaly and Denny Avdia, I mean, that's the young core right now. And, the guys who you think you want to keep. And I like Bilal. Obviously, we just don't know a ton about where he's going to be. He's so young. And Cody's just we talked about it before, he's kind of good at everything right now. He's maybe not great at everything. Not all of it's going to translate, but he's at least good at the college level at so many things that including, just the basics. I think he's going to translate to some degree in the NBA, and in a draft like this. I think versatility is where I'd go because I'm not crazy about anyone. I don't think any of these guys is like a dead bang star. And so versatility for that team when they still don't have the dead bang star is where I would go, because Cody and Bilal and Denny should be able to fit with virtually whoever ends up being the big star that the next great Wizards team is made of.
Uh, yeah, I am a big fan of Cody Williams, and I do think that there is a little bit of positional overlap there, but they are kind of all versatile enough to plug and play in different places and different sets. So I do like that pick. My first pick in this draft is going to be with the Rockets, my hometown team. So I was very hyped as I was watching the lottery go on and saw the Rockets jumped into the top four, and then up to the third pick. And with the third pick, the Rockets are going to go with Reed Shepherd. Um, I think as far as his fit with their current core, it's outstanding. He's really a guy probably that fits with virtually almost any core that's already set out there. So he's kind of at the top of the draft board for teams who know what they're doing, in my opinion. Uh, his shooting obviously was over 50% on threes this year. He projects as someone who I think can definitely play off ball, and there's a little bit of on ball potential there as far as creation. The Rockets aren't necessarily going to need him to do a lot of that, but that added component is obviously helpful. I think that opposing backcourts, when they see him and Amin Thompson, there's going to be somewhat of like, ah, man, this is going to be like a tough night. Passing lanes are going to be filled. Then you had Tari Eason behind that. It's exciting. Jabari Smith, also another long athlete who should be able to, as he kind of grows into his frame a little bit more. He did a good job this year, I think, of improving on the toughness level. And so as he continues to grow in that, I think that it's really going to be a fun Rockets core that Reed Shepherd's going to fit just splendidly in. Do you have anything you want to add on that pick, Chris?
Yeah, I do. I think this is the exact perfect fit for Reed Shepherd. I really like Reed. I am uncomfortable with him being a number one level guy, but as far as fit goes, I can't imagine a team that covers the weaknesses he's got better than the Rockets. I mean, he's such a great like you said, in the passing lanes kind of defender. He's so smart. He's in the way. The shooting is unbelievable. I mean, he just was so great this year. And the Rockets, so his weaknesses really are the on ball, potentially the on ball athleticism to like stick with really high level things. He doesn't have to do that on the Rockets. There are so many guys who already do that for them. They're loaded with players who can cover that, where he can just be, he's never going to have to go near the primary defensive assignment on ball. He can just be a disruptor on the weak side or in the pass lanes or whatever. As far as offense goes, he's just going to create so much space for them. The potential weakness is maybe on ball creation because, again, he's not like a fantastic athlete. They run everything through Sengun anyways. They have all kinds of shooters, all kinds of guys who want to be running offense, and he's going to be like the best spacer you could possibly have for all that to be operating. So it's a fantastic pick, and I love that for the Rockets.
Yeah, like I said, I'm ecstatic about it. The next pick is the Spurs, who you did grab them in our team selection also. So go ahead and make the next selection for the Spurs.
Yes, 3 out of the 4 first picks. This one was easy for us, so we talked about this in our inaugural podcast. We went with Steven Castle here. The only wrinkle here, the only reason maybe it could have been different than what we originally came up with Steven Castle, is the Spurs also have the 8th pick. And if you were trying to come up with a collection of players, maybe 2 guys that fit together better, you could theoretically go Dillingham or maybe Reza Shea just have a wing who's maybe a little more versatile. But Steven Castle is going to be a fantastic perimeter defender. He's a terrific on ball, off ball, whatever, getting over and around screens. It's going to be a great complement to Wembanyama and Vassell here. It's going to make Vassell's life so much easier because Castle can take the primary assignment, 1, 2, probably 3s. And I think it's just a kind of an easy fit that we've gone over in great detail in the past.
100% agreement there. I think that, like you said, he adds a wrinkle to their defense that they don't currently have on the roster to speak. I actually, you know what, Sohan brings a little bit of it. I think they're different kind of defenders, but I shouldn't write off Sohan because Sohan is solid on that end of the floor as well. The Pistons are next up, and I was making the selection for the Pistons, and a guy you just mentioned, and I know this guy was hoping he would go to the Spurs. All the reports out of his camper that he wants the Spurs. We had someone on that inaugural podcast that you mentioned that said before those reports that those reports were going to come out. Rob Dillingham. I think that next to Cade Cunningham and some of the other pieces like Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren, they are just begging for some kind of outside shooting. And Dillingham has proven can at least do that. I think his playmaking actually is a little bit undersold. I don't necessarily like him as as the starting primary engine for your team, but next to Cade, where he can do some secondary, and then when Cade goes to the bench, pick up a little bit more of that workload. Is a role I really like for Dillingham. Do you have anything you want to add on or ask about that?
I absolutely agree. I see Dillingham the same way. I think he's an electric scorer and will create a ton of much needed space for Cade and the rest of that Pistons offense where, you hope someone else can contribute shooting wise. And then defensively, they've got I'm more confident in the players defensively on the Pistons long term than I am offensively. I guess the one big thing we haven't mentioned talking about Dillingham to the Pistons is Jaden Ivey. And so I just quickly was thinking, where are you on Jaden Ivey at this point? Because I think that is instructive on where this pick goes.
I was higher on Ivy after his first season than I am now. And from people who watched quite a bit more Pistons games than I have, they've also kind of came back with similar sentiments that I think that maybe sixth man might be a better suited role for him, especially in this kind of Pistons offense that, like I said, is starved for shooting. I don't necessarily want to write him off as a player. Like I think he's a solid piece for them. I'm not sure that as a starter, at least not next to Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson, who I think are both more valuable pieces to them. And then again, Jalen Duren, also a piece I like a little bit more than Ivy, who needs shooting really to operate. Like all of these guys are begging for, hey, give me some kind of shooting. Ivy doesn't bring that, Dillingham does. And I actually think it's even possible that Cade could play the three a little bit next to Ivy and Dillingham. You do something Ivy, Dillingham, Cade, Asar, Duren as potentially a fun lineup. I'm not sure
Yeah,
that it's the best lineup they could bring, but it's potentially a fun lineup. But I think long term, I see Ivy more as a sixth man.
totally fair.
And again, that's not to write him off as a player because people have taken my sixth man comments about other players more negatively than I would have liked. Sixth men are extremely valuable for good teams. Good teams need a really strong sixth men, and more often than not, that is also the best role for that player to contribute to a successful team. All right. Next up, we have the Hornets. That's going to be my pick. We already did a podcast on the Hornets. We discussed them kind of at length. And one guy that we didn't really talk about much on that podcast, and I think going back, looking at their numbers a little bit more, Donovan Clingan is a guy I like here. They do have Mark Williams in house already. He only played 19 games, and those 19 games were solid, very, very good 19 games. Clingan, I think, is another level, another tier of player that, for some teams like the Rockets, where they have someone like Şengün, I wouldn't really consider Clingan because you're drafting a guy you really don't realistically project as a long-term starter unless you, again, get rid of Şengün. The Hornets, I think that Clingan projects as a long-term starter over Mark Williams, at least to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I like Klingon a lot. As we went over in the podcast, I'm not sure that I am of the opinion at this point that Klingon is that level above. I could be. I do really like Klingon, but I just think I like Mark Williams maybe a little bit more. And so you've never ever played those guys together, but in this draft where um, in this draft, I don't have a problem with this pick. I think that makes sense. If you are buying Klingon is a level up, then for sure that's the way to do it. And because Mark Williams is not so prohibitive, this isn't LaMelo or Brandon Miller. This is a rotation player we're talking about with Mark Williams. And so if you think you can do better, then Klingon's a perfectly reasonable pick. And that's just an eye of the beholder pick, I think, in this particular situation.
Next up, we have the Trailblazers at the number 7 pick, and that's going back to you, Chris, for the Trailblazers pick.
Yeah, I'm going to take Reza Shea here. The Blazers have such a weird collection of power forward kind of guys who all are athletic and aren't that good shooters and are between 6'7" and 6'9", and none of them has really jumped out at me as a clear option moving forward. So for them, if Klingon is still on the board here, I'd be considering him because Aiton's contract is only, I think, 1 or 2 more years here. And I think it's 2 more years. I think it's this upcoming season, and then he's last year is the following year, 25, 26. So I think you could be talking about Klingon or someone and not worry about Aiton so much. Scoot is really the only locked in piece. And since the collection of power forwards has not yet distinguished itself, I know Tumani Kamara is was really helpful, but he's a role player, and he's not preventing me from taking someone I really like. I think Riza Shea is a good fit here, and we talked about him a lot in the Hornets podcast, where he is such a natural movement guy. He's so good at getting around the court. He creates so much chaos just through movement, and the shooting is frankly unclear. He shot so well at the beginning of the year. It wasn't so good the second half of the season. If he, like so many of these guys, the shooting skill, how good that gets, completely determines or is a major factor in how impactful the player is going to be. That's almost goes without saying at this point in 2024 for every player. But for Riza Shea, I do think at least he's big. He's listed at 6'9". He's not big and strong, but he's 6'9". He's 19. He's very young, just turned 19. He is 200 pounds. He's not like overly thin. He's got solid length. He has good, not great athleticism, and he is pretty aware. And I just love the movement. The movement's so good. And Alex talked about it a little bit when we did that Orange podcast. He creates so much chaos just by running around. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of what people liked about Jaime Jaquez. It's just in a more athletic package here, and it's a space creation tool. I mean, it just is. That's what it is. So I hope he can shoot. I think he probably gets to a point that is solid, at least, would be my guess. I don't know if it's going to be ever elite, but he's going to create space through movement. He's big and athletic. He should be able to guard. There's no reason he can't be an above average defensive player kind of across the board, guarding threes, fours, maybe smaller guys, maybe the occasional small big. But I just think you can never have too many shots at that kind of player. And here at 7 for the Trailblazers, when the only guy I really care about is Scoot, I think maybe I'm just not quite as thrilled about Shaedon Sharpe so far. I think he's good, but like I have no, I'm not sure at all that he's going to be an above average player at this point. It's still quite a project, I think, and he's still so young, but it's hard to lock that in. But Riza Shea just kind of fits the system. He's going to hopefully provide some shooting and at least some chaos on offense to help.
That makes sense to me. He's kind of the only player left on the board that both fits. I'd like to add Simons in to players. I think that you kind of playing around for them. I do like Simons a lot. And Riza Shea is not going to positionally overlap with either of Scoot or Simons. I'm not out on Scoot yet. He had a slightly disappointing rookie season for sure, but I think that there's enough silver linings this season to him that it's at least worth still planning around, especially given that how much draft capital you poured into him already. I hate the sunk cost fallacy, but we're almost it's a little bit too early, I think, to give up on him at this point. The next pick we have is the Spurs at 8. Again, the Spurs are your team, so go ahead and make that pick.
Yeah, this was the hardest pick for me, I think, doing this because if you have the Spurs and you've already drafted Stephon Castle, I don't love what's left. I'm going to go with Topic here, but this is absolutely the exact pick that I would trade out of it if I could. I want to put shooting around Victor Wembanyama, and I've just drafted Stephon Castle and Nikola Topic, neither of whom is guaranteed to be a good shooter. And it's more in this situation because I'm not crazy about the other fits. I dislike the Topic fit less maybe than I dislike the other fits is really the reason that we ended up with Nikola Topic here. I think Topic is a good player. I think he's a very good passer. He gets you out and running. So I'll be positive. Let's talk about what I like. I like Topic getting you out and running. I think he is a very good passer. He is also a chaos creator, especially on offense. He really is um, moving. And with Vassell and with Castle, theoretically, and with Wembanyama, that's a lot of athleticism. And you can get out and run. There's no reason you couldn't do that. It's a lot of size. Castle's 6'6", Topic 6'7". That's a lot of size. Even if Topic, I don't think he's like a really good defender, he's probably never going to be an above average defender. He's probably not killing you. He's just too big to be killing you. And Castle is the one that's going to be taking the primary matchup anyways. So I like the passing. I think he does create chaos with off ball movement in the same kind of way, a lot of cuts. Um, and I just wish one of them, I wish I could guarantee that Castle or Tobic could shoot. If I could guarantee one of them, I'd feel way better about this. And maybe they both can, maybe one of them can, but it's hard to bank on two guys. So I think this is just a talent play more than anything at this spot because I don't like the other fits. I don't think Holland or Buzelis can shoot at all right now. I don't want to bring those guys in. Going a little down the list, I'm just not as crazy about the talent with some of the guys who I think can shoot. And so again, this is just kind of an awkward spot where it's more of a talent play or a trade out, I think. But Tobic is who I would probably pick at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, it definitely, if they were to keep that pick and make the Topic pick after the Castle pick, I'm sure that Keldon Johnson and Vassell, or Devin Vassell, are definitely wondering who's the odd man out, unless they're going real small around Wimby, which I personally wouldn't necessarily go that small. So there's definitely some interesting conversations to have there around that pick. And you're right, it's not a fun spot to be in, I don't think. The next pick is going to go to the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm going to be picking for them here. My thinking behind this pick was they're probably not going to be picking very high going forward. I do think that, 1 year blimp, 1 year kind of hiccup for them. And next year, I fully expect them to be chugging along to where they were 2 years ago. So for an upside pick, Ron Holland, I think is where I'm going to go with this selection. He's super athletic, so him next to Ja in transition is just going to be terrifying for teams. You do have the shooting at the 4 or 5, depending on where they're playing Jaren Jackson, to kind of make up for any potential worries about Holland's shooting, because at this point he's not a good shooter. But I don't think that the form is totally busted by any means. But there aren't a ton of guys who have shot like him in college and then became good shooters in the NBA. Not unheard of, but not a ton of them. So it is a risk, but again, I think when you're not expecting many picks this high, you want to go ahead and make that upside swing when you can.
Yeah, I've been critical of Holland quite a bit, but I think this is a totally fine place, especially like you said, for a team who's probably not going to be here again soon, to get that upside play in, and you hope it works out. You hope he eventually supplants the fantastic Vince Williams Jr. On that small forward spot, and can fit around Bane and John Jaren, but it's just an upside play at this point. He's so young. He's got a ton of talent. The shot, you're right. It looks fine. It looks fine. It just isn't going in, and so it just couldn't have been in a worse spot. So hopefully it was just the bad environment, and yeah, I think it makes total sense.
With the next pick, we have the Utah Jazz at number 10. I will be selecting for them. As I was going through this pick, I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll go with Devin Carter was my first thought. Then I'm looking at the Jazz roster and I'm seeing 6'3", not really a point guard kind of combo guard. 6'2", not really a point guard kind of combo guard. And so I'm going through the names and I'm thinking, do we really want to add another small combo guard that's not really, a full-time point guard? And maybe that's what they're going for with a bunch of combo guards that can kind of do it by committee. Not necessarily how I like my playmaking done. Rebounding, absolutely by committee. Playmaking, not so much. So the pick I'm going to go here with is Matas Buzelis. I think that him next to Lowry Martin is a very interesting combination. I don't know how long Lowry's going to be on their team. His window doesn't really seem to match up with the window that the Jazz currently have. So Maybe it's just Buzel's learning from Markkinen for a little bit, which would absolutely help his career, I think. Uh, where's your head at for the Jazz here?
Yeah, the Jazz are in a weird spot because I agree. I'm not crazy about any of the guard fits next to them, but it's still like you hate to bring in someone who you don't love at the guard spot just to like an Isaiah Collier, for instance, who would just take the ball out of some of these guys' hands. And the non-point guard guys that the Jazz have need the ball in their hands. A lot of them do. And I think it's an awkward fit. You're right, definitely. I agree. I don't know how long Markkanen's going to be there. I think he's fantastic, obviously. I'm curious about the fit with Taylor Hendricks because I like Hendricks and he didn't play a ton last year. But Montes is a project player, and so is Hendricks. And so it'll be interesting to watch them kind of be a 3-4 tandem, maybe someday a little bit of small ball with at the 4-5. But um, you know, he's a project, and he's real smart. He's got good at better than you think athleticism, and we've talked about him a little bit in prior podcasts. But it's some of this stuff. He needs to get out of that G League system, get into a position where they can actually take advantage of his skills. And I think the project player on a team like the Jazz, where they're not trying to get all the way to anywhere next year, it's not a flat out tank and it's not a flat out playoff push. They're just trying to get talent. And I think this is even though I think he's a project player, this is a good shot. This is a good place for that. The 10th pick in a crummy draft is totally fine for a project player like this.
Agreed. Next we have the Chicago Bulls. Chris, right back to you for your Bulls pick that I know you're super excited about.
Yeah, we love the Bulls out here. I actually have always loved the Bulls, and I really hope someday soon we get to talk about them more seriously. But right now it's hard. I, I I'm gonna go with Saloon, Tidjane Saloon, and please forgive me if I am struggling with that name a little bit. He is a 6'9". He's listed at 200 pounds, but I'll bet he's bigger than that. Very young 18-year-old playing for a French team called Cholet. And he is such an interesting athlete because he is this big, more athletic than Riza Shea kind of power forward who has had some success shooting. He's shooting over 31%. He shot about 30, almost 32% from three. So not like great, but 81.5% from the free throw line. He's very, very young. It looks fine. And he's got generally pretty decent touch, I think. His field goal percentage is weirdly low, but if you look at the numbers, over half his shots are from three, so that's a little bit deceiving. You know, his shooting is an obvious swing skill, and like I mentioned before, it's for everybody. But he's this big athletic kid who looks almost clumsy at times because he's clearly just trying to adjust to his size and athleticism now being so young. I think that comes with time. And then you have a really nice power forward prospect, at least the body of one, with some good touch. His defensive technique needs work. He's not good at dealing with speed right now. I think, again, that's part of the clumsiness that is just an adjustment. He doesn't have great rim protector kind of instincts. Like you'll see Riza Shea or Bazelis or whoever else, really try to block some shots. And he just kind of puts his hands up and thinks, I'm bigger than you. And then good basketball players go around him. But I think physically he definitely fits in. He's going to play. I think he might be able to play down a spot three athletically, 3 and 4. But right now he's nowhere near being like a lockdown perimeter guy. But he's in good help position most of the time. I think it's a swing. I think this is definitely a project pick and more about the Bulls. I don't think Kobe White fits with any of these guards that are on the board pretty much. I think the only thing you got here is let's just take a swing. See if we can get somebody to come in and be an impact player. And I think this is a guy who, with his sheer size, athleticism, and at least the outline of shooting talent, the outline of help instincts, and someone who should become kind of better at the stuff I was just criticizing him for as he gets more comfortable in his body. You know, he should be a little quicker. He should be a little more comfortable against speed. And a little bit of high level coaching is going to help him a lot with the help defense, you know, actually um, playing the ball instead of just standing there with his hands up. This stuff is fixable, I think. And if I was betting on any young athlete to start figuring it out, it's a guy who still looks a little clumsy because he just got really big and athletic really fast. I think he is probably a buy low kind of prospect because the stats are still bad. You know, he's just not contributing that much. But I see the outline of at least someone who I think is worth taking a shot because he could be a contributor in the future.
Next up, we have the Thunder selecting, and Chris, that is again your team. I know they're hearing from you a lot today. Who are the Thunder taking?
I think I'm going to go with Devin Carter here. This is an interesting spot. I thought about Walter. I thought about McCain. I kind of wanted to take this is a spot where I actually, if Saloon was still on the board, I probably would have taken him because a lot of the guys. This takes more about the Thunder almost. Carter's a good basketball player. He can score. He's generally a goodish passer, even though he's not like a point guard. He's a tough defender. He's working hard. Carter is less the point here than the Thunder fit because the Thunder needs someone who can come in the door and help. And so the reason Saloon was on my radar, even though I just talked about how he was a prospect, is because they have lots of guys who can help. Right now, they already do. They have guys who they're 9 deep of, you know, NBA players that can play practically in the finals. And I'm not even counting Josh Giddey, who I assume they'll trade or something at some point after this playoffs because they've got Case on Wallace, they've got Isaiah Joe, they've got Wiggins, who all come in. You hope Ousmane Dieng comes in and is really a contributor at some point in the future. But the guys who are already doing it, Wallace and Joe and Wiggins, are not big. And so I was thinking, do you really want to bring in another little guard who, even though I think Devin Carter can contribute right now, he can shoot, he can get in there and play defense and help. Maybe a power forward prospect, someone who can create a little size but also shoot in the future, like a Saloon, would maybe fit better. But he's off the board. Carter is who I think probably is the most guaranteed walk in the door contributor in a team where they don't need him to do a ton of stuff. It's just let's scale you down from your current really high usage and just use what you do. Come off the bench, spell Shea, you know, work with Kason. You've got this incredible infrastructure already, and I think he's going to be able to contribute defensively, offensively, and he doesn't have to be a primary initiator. He doesn't have to be a secondary or tertiary initiator. He can just do whatever he actually is good at the NBA level. And I think there's a couple things that he should be able to help with. So I think this is a fairly comfortable fit for even though he's small and he's just going to be able to contribute quickly, I think.
It's always interesting when you're drafting for a team in the lottery who seemingly doesn't really have many holes to fill. I do have the next pick with the Kings. The Kings are, from the sound of De'Aaron Fox's interview when he talked about Malik Monk, losing Malik Monk this offseason. It sounds like another team probably is going to be able to beat whatever bid the Kings can make. So I think that while this guy is not nearly ready to step into Monk's shoes yet, he is the person I think that is most likely to be able to fill a similar role to Malik Monk and Jacoby Walter. Lots of differences between their game, but there is enough overlap that you can kind of squint and see the potential fit there. Again, we're talking about a team that doesn't have a ton of holes to fill, but that is an important one to fill. That they probably still have to address it in free agency also, but I don't think there's many options there. So he could get some rookie season minutes. Whether they're successful or not, we'll see.
Yeah, he's gonna walk in the door as a good shooter, and you hope in the future he's a Malik Monk kind of player. So I think it's a good replacement fit.
I will say the difference I think in their game, and if I'm remembering correctly, Walter's mid-range game is lacking somewhat, I could be mistaken on that, and that's somewhere where Monk kind of could make his lunch. So there, like I said, lots of differences between their game too, but that's kind of where my head was at with that pick. Last pick of the lottery, Trailblazers. Let's hear it.
Yeah, in this situation, my Blazers here have already taken Zachary Rizachet. So we've already talked about them quite a bit. So I think at this point, you're just looking for someone you think can be a contributor at the NBA level, especially in a draft like this. And I think Jared McCain is a good fit. He's going to be able to shoot. I think he fits next to Scoot. He's a tertiary playmaker a little bit, and really just kind of a spacer and someone who's going to work hard on defense. I think it's a fairly comfortable fit here.
And is there any thought, I know they have Aiden on board already and Robert Williams. Is there any thought as far as a big goes? I know Aiden only has 2 years left on his deal. Is that stone to turn here with this pick with a Deron Holmes or a Khalil Ware possibly?
It's less for me. I think in this situation, it's less about the bigs on the roster than it is that I like McCain better than the bigs on the bigs that are available. Um, for you mentioned Simons earlier, and the reason I didn't talk about Simons is because I think Simons is very good. He's quite the scorer. I don't know that I believe in a Scoot Simons backcourt as being part of the core of the next team, the next good Blazers team. Especially, I think Simons has only got a year or two left on his, maybe 2 years left on his deal. I can't imagine, or I can imagine. If I were running the Blazers, I probably would be splitting them up to get some more substantial defensive help next to Scoot and give Scoot a little more uh, freedom. So that's just my personal thought. It's why I kind of didn't even have Simons in my brain when I was making these picks because I see him as probably a piece that I'd be moving as the Blazers. But if he's going to stick around, certainly, with Shaden and Scoot and Simons, you already have quite a small guard group there. I don't know that I don't know that it impacts though a pick of Jared McCain because I think Jared can play with any of those guys because he's going to be kind of an off ball and Simons and Scoot both are very comfortable on him. It's the lack of a Khalil Ware or one of these other guys is more about I think I like the spacing provided by McCain better than what I would get out of those bigs.
That is totally fair. So that is all we have for you today. Thank you for tuning into Ahead of the Game. Again, we had Chris Filer here with me, James Oxford. Please make sure to, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe, share that out, like it. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you mark our podcast so you hear every single new episode. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or ideas you'd like to see us discuss, feel free to leave that in the comments. Thank you and have an excellent day.